Welcome back. Thanks for watching my channel. I really do appreciate it. Please like, share, and subscribe. I really am trying to grow this channel. I think I've got a pretty diverse array of things I'm showing on here in the way of off-road and mechanical. Something I try to do every year to prevent me from being the guy broken on the trail, and that is a pre-season prep. I don't get a lot of miles on this rock crawler, but it does get some hours during the season, and a lot of it is under load and heat, harsh conditions, things like that. So always change the oil, always do your grease and link inspections, things like that. But this year I'm going to also go into some tune-up issues. Last fall at Sand Hollow, I started getting a detonation out in the sand dunes. I also got a check engine light. Tells me there's something going on under the hood. It's been several years since I've done a tune on this. So I'm gonna start with a basic tune-up, and then we're gonna proceed with the rest of my inspections and maintenance for this season. Keep in mind, doing all this stuff won't guarantee you won't be a guy broken or stuck on a trail, but the more you can do ahead of time, the more you can check, inspect, and correct before the season starts, the better your odds are of not being the guy on the trail stuck and broken. So regardless, eventually you will be stuck and broke on the trail, but the goal is not to be. Again, I'm going to start with the tune-up, and I know you don't see this Jeep with doors and a windshield on very often, but the doors really don't fit very good anymore, and there's things that are broken in it, like the frame. It's winter, so I keep the wind out of my face that way. But the start of my tune-up is going to start right down here underneath the portion of the roll cage where there's a fuel filter. I only put a new fuel filter in about every 2 to 3 years on this Jeep, but new fuel filters in, inspect all your lines, clear up to the tank. First thing on tune-ups though, I don't like just throwing parts at a vehicle. I like to kind of do some diagnostics and some preliminary checks first. First thing I'm doing, pulling a plug, and I'll pull a couple more, but the wear on the plug is really good. The electrode is flat, straight, cut still, which means the plugs have not worn out due to mileage. But they're getting a little black, little carbon. When you're running these things at low RPM all the time, they have a tendency to do that. They tend to load up a little bit. So I'm going to throw a set of plugs at it, I'm pretty sure. I will check my wires, my plug wires, and we'll determine whether or not I need to replace those. Now, anytime you're running headers, you really run a lot of risk of plug wires burning up because they are sitting way too close to a hot spot. But now that I know I'm getting some carbon tracking on my plugs, that creates additional resistance, which is also going to cause carbon tracking in your distributed cap and rotor. So my next thing I'm going to do is pull that cap and rotor, and I am going to inspect those two items. All right, bring you up here. You can see all that carbon tracking in the distributor rotor. You can also see on the tip here, well, maybe you can see on the tip. There you go. Some of that carbon buildup in that pitting there, that's just basically arc welding itself. Inside the distributor cap, there's two things I see in here. First of all, you can see the same type of carbon tracking on the electrodes going to the plug wires. You can see some wear on the button for the coil wire. And then if you kind of look at the black areas between the center pole and those electrodes, you can see kind of variations in the color. and that's telling me I'm starting to get some carbon tracking. So it's definitely time for a tune-up. Now, inside the distributor, there's not much maintenance to do. I've got the stator or the pickup. This is what triggers the module to tell the coil and the fuel injection to fire. This is a GM TBI module. They're pretty self-explanatory. The basics, I'm also going to clean my air cleaners out. Those are reusable ones. While you're doing your pre-season check, make sure you check battery or batteries, in my case, the connections and the condition of the batteries, so those are ready for the season, especially if you do a lot of winching and welding. I'm also going to flush the full hydraulic power steering system on this. Ordered my tune-up parts. First thing I'm doing is installing all of my plugs. If you don't know your firing order, keep track of your plug wires, where they go on the distributor and the plug side. Running headers always makes it a little more interesting, fishing the plug and wires out. Make sure to be careful with the plugs. You don't want to crack the ceramic or cross thread them. Start them by hand, torque them accordingly. Well, the only plug that was fouled at all was number 2. So I'll take a little closer look at that cylinder, make sure my intake, make sure I don't have something going on there. Also, when you're ordering parts, make sure you look at them when they come in. Rock Auto is really good about this. They'll send you new stuff. Just fill out the form. They don't even want the plug back, but they said save it for a couple weeks just in case the manufacturer does. Well, I try to use good quality Delco parts, things like that. Tend to have less problems and last longer. Talk plug wires here for a second. I use good plug wires, equal to or better than original equipment. These happen to be AC Delco, which are pretty much original equipment on these TBI engines. Little tip of the day, this dielectric grease that comes with them. I throw this in my oh crap bag in the toolbox in this rock crawler, and I use my tube of dielectric grease in the shop. That way, if I have a problem on the trail and I need some, I've got a small self-contained package and I can use it and done. Especially if you have something like a module go bad on a trail. I do carry an extra module with me, and you have to back those modules with dielectric grease. So, good thing to have in your toolbox, and good thing to have in the shop. Thing to pay attention to, your firing order. It's usually stamped on the intake or it's listed somewhere. But if you mix them up, you ain't going to run right or at all. So pay attention to your firing order when you're doing these plugs. After you get all the wires on, make sure you got the firing order right, start it up, test that. Then make sure they're routed carefully so that they're not touching headers, not touching something that'll rub through them. I usually on street vehicles will use the original wire separators, but on like rock crawlers, I not only use the original separators for routing, I also will zip tie stuff into place because things get thrown around a little bit. Save you some trail repair right there. Pulling the camera up here, I don't know when this fell off, but you can tell it's been off for a while. I also started getting a check engine light a few months back, and I think this may have something to do with it. I think we'll clean that up, re-grease those terminals, and that may get rid of the check engine light. On top of that, This may help it perform a little better. Generally, you don't have to reset the timing on electronic ignitions. I did check it. I'm just fine there. It didn't change. Usually on the point stuff is when you have to reset time, you have to set points. But no more check engine light now. It really runs good. I was a little raw on transmission fluid. Probably had something to do with the last time I rolled it. I'm done under the hood now. Tuned up, oil's good because I just changed it, so I don't need to change it again. Transmission fluid's full. Now I'm going to go underneath and start doing my drivetrain inspections for the upcoming season. Once I have a wheel off the ground, I do this on, well, the front. The rear I kind of do different because it's not a steering axle. But I spin the wheel, make sure I've got good smooth wheel bearings without the hub locked in. If you've got slugs, I would take the slug out so you can feel what the wheel's really doing. Now, I packed the bearings last year. These don't get a lot of miles, they get a lot of abuse. So I'm comfortable not repacking the wheel bearings at this point, but I want to make sure they're tight so I don't have any play this way. Smooth, no noise. Now, I also, you can probably see this, I've got some up and down movement on the top of the tire. And when I look at it, my upper kingpin has a little bit of play in it. Now, a couple of years ago, I put the brass bushings in, and those seem to take up a whole bunch of slop. These are going to have a little bit of play compared to a ball joint, but if it's excessive, you need to rebuild the kingpin. At this point, it's not excessive. I can just feel it, and that's okay. Next, I'm going to inspect my front axle U-joints, and these are a solid joint. There's no hole for grease. There's no needle bearings. Yukon super joints, I believe, are what in this. You can also have like CTMs or the new Nitros version, but they're really strong, but you have to grease each cap individually. You also have to check them for wear and make sure the snap rings are all in place. All right, now I've wiped the inverted grease fitting down. And then sometimes these don't take grease readily. And they're kind of messy, so. You can hear them as they push grease in. If you get a clogged up grease fitting, you may have to take it out, clean it, put it back in. Now, I don't know if you can see this real well, but I kind of purposefully pushed additional grease out. That's sometimes easier to tell if you've got grease in them or not, but I don't like doing that. It just gets messy, and if you do that, I would definitely wipe them down. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side, but while I am here, I always make sure I have my kingpins greased. And again, make sure they take grease. I'm a big fan of lubrication. I am one of the few people that will run a Chevy independent front suspension for 400,000 miles and never have to change a ball joint. and that's because I keep them clean and greased. All right, I'm gonna move to the other side. Got both side axle U-joints all greased. My upper and lower kingpins greased. I've also inspected the brake pads. Wheel bearings are smooth. My lockout hubs on this one work good. If you have slugs, good idea to pull them out and spin them so everything you see moves. I just had this differential cover off a month ago because I developed a pretty bad leak that I couldn't tighten up and make go away. So I have already inspected the teeth on my differential and serviced the fluid. Now, if you have a system like this where you have to take all the steering off to get to your differential, you can usually pull the fill plug out and kind of point your flashlight correctly and look, and you should be able to see maybe a tooth or two. I always recommend servicing the fluid and the differentials. If you have a chipped tooth or something, it's way cheaper to swap out a set of gears and not have to do all the bearings and setup and stuff again. Next, I am going to jack the whole front end up, and I want to inspect my links and link joints. This is generally not the angle I use to show this, but this joint is getting pretty sloppy. And I noticed it because when I hit the brakes in low range, the axle shifts and moves forward. I usually can jack up the pumpkin and determine how loose that joint is, but this joint's got some slop in it, this joint's got some slop in it. Both of these I would probably replace in the very near future, but this is my front drive shaft. It clunks a lot. It's been this way for a couple of years. These are tractor spline here. They're not actually for a drive shaft, they're for a farm tractor. I'm going to leave these until I need to replace this CV joint up here. The reason being is I'm going to swap out the CV joint and install just a 1410 high angle. I have the yoke for it, but since these drive shafts run about $1,000, I'll wait till it's worn out. Now, again, turn these, wiggle your U-joints, make sure you don't have any U-joint issues. This would vibrate if I were driving it on the road, by the way. This is off-road use. It's just 250 wall nasty tube. So, and then this is the old Johnny joint that is starting to really get some play. This Johnny joint seems to be okay, as well as the other side up here. So for now, I mean, yes, there's some play, but I can get away with that. It's a captured bolt. It's going to make more noise. It's going to make other issues before it would actually break. So right now, I can get away with it for a little while, but those are the things you look for when you're doing this. Same thing on my rear drive shaft now. I've got some play in this slip yoke as well, not near what the front one does, but again, when this CV joint wears out, I will swap this out with a straight 1410 joint. The reason I had these CV joints built with 1350s is I used to drive this on the street quite a bit. Now this is pretty much off-road only. Now, I put a zip tie on my transfer case. That way I know where the level is. That's where it's full. So currently I'm okay on my transfer case level. Transmission is buried up under this skid plate here, but that was serviced a couple of years ago. Now this has more hours than miles, and I have no issues with the transmission fluid. If you start getting a lot of whining and discoloration in the fluid, definitely pull the pan and service that. After the initial inspection on all my links and drive lines, it's time to grease everything. I grease all 16 joints on the suspension links, plus all of the fittings on the drive line. Some other things I'm going to look at: my bump stops, make sure they're not torn up. Got my shocks, make sure they aren't blown out and leaking. Check for any axle leaks or cracks that you can find. Same thing with these shocks, make sure they are not blown out, bent. I always take a look at my truss mounts as well. Make sure I don't have any breaks in those. Now on these high steer arms, I use silicone spray to lube them. And very important, I always retorque the top kingpin bolts. These have a notorious tendency to start twisting, coming loose, and breaking. So if they're always checked and they're always at 75 pounds, you're probably okay. I also added this piece here with a double shear for the tie rod. That helps keep that high steer arm from twisting and breaking those bolts. If these were a higher quality high steer arm, like those Spider Tracks I have for the new buggy, I wouldn't worry about it as much. But since I put these on, I really haven't had any issues with it. Another thing I always recommend, look at your lugs and retorque them. There's a lot of stress going on in these wheels. You can usually look inside, which I can here, and look at your brake pads. My pads on this are still almost new, mostly because it doesn't get a lot of miles, it just gets a lot of hours. Now on the rear differential, I am going to pull the cover and service this one. 3 years ago I broke the gears, and this is the first time I've gone in to look at it since then. So it's probably time to change the oil. I save the oil and filter it and see if there's any metal in it, and then if all the teeth and everything look good, then I will seal it back up and fill her back up with oil. You can actually see the wear pattern, plus you can actually see the old paint that's still on the gears. And if you look at the shadow, I kind of like doing this with gears that I've done. I mean, this is a really good wear pattern. They're coming in and out of the tooth evenly. What I'm really checking for is any loose bearings, any missing or chipped teeth. Run it side to side. Now, right now this is in park, so I'm going to kick it into neutral so I can see what kind of backlash, make sure I haven't gained a bunch of backlash. Now with the wheels on the ground, you're really not going to be able to feel the backlash, but you can just lightly put some pressure on the pinion and you can feel you've got a little bit of a click. Now I really don't care what the backlash is. I just want to make sure it doesn't feel excessive. If it feels excessive, then I might have had a problem, but to change the backlash now would change your wear pattern, and right now this has a great wear pattern. The other thing you want to look at is make sure your bolts appear to still have the lock washer intact. If you wanted to, you could go around and retorque them. I don't see a need for that. This was just an inspection and a fluid check. Fortunately, most of the old adhesive came off on the cover, which made it a little easier to clean. Outside of filling it, that's all there is to servicing that. I definitely recommend either inspecting or replacing your fluids on a pretty regular basis. Last part I do when I'm getting ready for the season is I go around, and it's called nutting and bolting. This one right here is a good example. It's loose, and I'm going to go around and check all my link bolts, mounting bolts, adjustment bolts, caliper bolts. I'm doing this at speed on the video, but in reality, I spend probably a good hour underneath my rig checking nuts and bolts. When I'm nutting and bolting, checking bolts, I don't try to see if they'll go tighter because they're probably torqued, but I put a wrench on it and see if I can move it reasonably. If it's loose, tighten it. If it's not loose, leave it alone. And that's going to do it for the shocks, links, mounts, drive lines. As I'm doing this nutting and bolting exercise, I also run down frame areas and I look at the frame, where all these link mounts are welded to. Make sure I don't have any frame breaks that I can see. Yeah, check your trusses and such. Make sure you're not broken somewhere and you just missed it. And you know, it is easy to miss stuff. You kind of get used to everything you're looking at. But if you throw eyes on it a few times before your season or before big trips, there's a chance you might catch something before you're broken. And that's kind of the goal. A year ago, I actually looked at this truss and I tore it here and down here. And that would have been exciting on the trail, so it got re-welded and patched again. And underneath, I think I'm about done now. Since your rear axle on this one is a full float, you want to make sure your wheel bearings on the rear are smooth, just like you did on the fronts. And I think we're good there. Back the camera far enough so that you can see this. I built in the back of my Jeep this little containment area for things I like to carry, which is part of my annual prep too. Not only do you want to fix things that you mechanically know are wrong, inspect all your fluids, things like that, but decide what you want to carry in the Jeep in case something fails. What are some common failure items? What are some things that I think are a good idea to carry? So I've kind of emptied this box out and I'm going to go through a lot of this stuff. First thing, I've got this rack for fluids. I carry oil, antifreeze in 1 quart, power steering, transmission fluid, and hopefully if you have a rollover and you lose more than 1 quart, someone else on the trail has some too. Some other things I carry an extra belt. I carry a bunch of miscellaneous hose clamps. I carry a U-joint. I carry a bunch of wire, fuses, connectors, test light. It doesn't have to be a high dollar test light, but a test light nonetheless can get yourself out of trouble. This is always one of the more popular things I carry, a Tupperware dish full of bolts, and I put a little rag on the top of it so that it doesn't rattle as quite as much. Fuel pump. I carry a spare fuel pump. I keep it sealed up in a bag. I also carry an extra ignition module. And in the little bag is some dielectric grease for that. These are common failures on the trail. It's really nice when you have a failure like that, you can replace it. I'm going to bring you in here real close. Mostly so you can see I carry a starter, and it's bolted in right through the starter bolts. This bag is not sealed. It is open in the back so that if moisture gets in, it does dry out, but that'll kind of keep some of the dirt and debris off. I do carry a old factory car jack. These to me are more handy than the high lift jacks are, which I obviously do have a high lift jack too. And these little screw jacks I like better than hydraulic jacks. They work underwater. Doesn't ruin them. Now, I also carry a funnel. Now back here, I carry a universal cooling hose. This radiator hose isn't the exact fit for the upper or the lower, but it will work on either in a pinch. I also carry the jumper cable set, which is actually for my welder, but it'll work in the pinch for a jump starter too. I do carry fuel line. I carry some in-tank submersible fuel line. I carry a universal hose kit for full hydraulic steering because I have full hydraulics on this, and these hoses are really hard to tell just by looking at them if they're going bad. They're very stiff hose. The ones on the Jeep have wraps on them so that they don't wear from abrasion or break from abrasion. So you really won't know when one of these is ready to go till one of them goes. I have one hose I carry I can make on the trail and get myself off the trail. If one hose breaks, I'll get myself off the trail and I will build a full set of hoses at that point. Okay, now I gotta organize this back out, put it all back in, and this part of my trail prep for the season is ready to go. Recovery wise, I carry soft shackle and a snatch block ring. I also carry, see if I can reach over here. I carry a couple different straps. This is the long strap. I know a lot of people are using like Yankum ropes now. I still like that one because it's compact. Now this strap, I actually bought it to use as a tree saver more than anything. It's a 10-foot long strap. I use this strap to pull people more than anything else on this Jeep. It's short. I'm usually close to the next guy. All they need is a little boom and they're out. I don't have to be 30 feet away. The 30 feet away ones come in handy, don't get me wrong, but I would say I use a 10-foot strap more than anything. And just to promote someone else's product that I think is probably one of the better products out there, trailmater.com has a 10-foot Yankum rope, which is a real nice product. Two other things I make sure are in good shape: my bug repellent, sunblock, and toilet paper. Also, I store a few rain ponchos in my Jeep for those just in case days, you know. I carry air hose because I do have an onboard air system, tire plug equipment, a few emergency straps, an extra air gauge, and some rags. One of the things I always check, make sure I'm still in good shape on, are my first aid kit. Now, this first aid kit sits on the outside of the vehicle on my left front wheel in front of the driver firewall. It is there because everyone knows what that cross means and they can get to that watertight box and get to a first aid kit. I'm sure most people do have first aid kits in their vehicles. I kind of built my own first aid kit and I keep it where you can get to this Jeep without having to get in the passenger compartment. You don't have to open the hood to do it, but I just do this because it's easier. But if my Jeep's laying on its lid and someone needs to get to a first aid kit, they can pop this open and all the stuff will just spill out. It's an old ammo container bolted to the firewall. But I keep plenty of towels or dry rags, and I bag everything just in case this does leak. But I mean, these have been in here for 4 or 5 years. You can see they're in pretty good shape. So I've got plenty of dry rags. I keep a bandage for not only bandaging, but splinting. Plenty of gloves. I just use one glove to tuck a bunch of other gloves inside of them. Lots of bandages, moist towelettes, antiseptic, hemostat, pliers. So lots of those. First aid tape. A big bag of Band-Aids, tweezers. I actually do keep a suture in here too. And then aspirin. Headaches, pain relief. So, like I said, cater to whatever you want to put in your own first aid kit, but I put the things in my first aid kit that I think would be handy for where I'm at. This is something a lot of people think is a little bit weird, but I touch up paint. A lot of stuff on this, like the links, cross members, things like that on a regular basis. Now, it's not because I care whether or not this has paint chips or scratches. What I do after I've been four-wheeling a couple of times, I run down to the car wash, clean the undercarriage off, and I do a thorough inspection to make sure I don't have any broken or cracked welds. Once I've inspected where a rock has ripped down the side of it or hit a link or something like that, and I have verified that there's no damage other than paint or cosmetic, I throw a little bit of paint on it. What that does is covers up where the rock hit it. Then the next time I run this thing over, beat it half to death on some rocks or ledges, I know where those rocks and ledges have hit, and I know where to inspect that way. Once I inspect the new gouges and tears along it, if any welds or anything looks broken, I fix it, and then I throw a quick coat of paint on that. It always gives me a place to look when I'm inspecting for damage, if I'm looking where paint's been torn off, because that I know is where it's been hit. Just kind of something I've always done, and I don't know if it helps or hurts, but I have found things that way. So anyway, that's just one of the little things I like to do. That is going to do it for my season prep video. I hope there's something you can take away from this. It's kind of what I do as a normal routine. I do reiterate, you don't have to do everything every year all the time. You know, differential fluids are a good example of that. I went ahead and did my rear this year because I did gears in it a couple of years ago. Wanted to verify how it looked. But definitely check conditions of fluids, see if there's any sparkly things in them you don't want. Nut and bolt, check everything you can. The more things you can put hands on and check, more likely the better off you're gonna be, because if you find it now, it won't give you a problem on the trail. Even with doing all of this every year and on a regular basis throughout the season, I should say, you could still find yourself broken on a trail, because that's kind of part of the name of the game when you're into the off-roading stuff. But you just don't want to be the guy on the trail every time you go out with something broken. Try to be prepared, try to stay on top of it, try to be ahead of the curve, as they say. Anyway, that's going to do it. Please like, share, and subscribe. I really do appreciate it, and see you next time. There it is.
back end's up.
Yeah, you should be able to climb it now. Beautiful.
You got it. Yeah. Never say die.
Nice job, man.
Controller not letting you spin.
Hang on, hang on. Matt, turn passenger and back up about 6 inches. Now hard driver and come towards me. Get your belly in that notch right there. Like that. Yeah. Woohoo. Bad news. Try coming ahead with that.
Ooh, that felt light though.
All right, well, backing out ain't going to be easy either. Same thing to where I was. Follow your own advice.
Right. It's a lot easier when you're outside the truck.
Yeah, no kidding.
No, it's fine from here.
Might have to take a couple of awesome power skills. You're close. You just got to get at that rock to push you towards me.
Push it in.
Yeah.
Right. the knots.
I really like watching Tony drive. It's just so smooth.
Yep. He and that rig are one.
Someone that says,
Let's try one more.
let's try it one more time.
Possible.
One more time is usually what gets me.
Whenever we're digging around our utilities and stuff, you know, nice big, it's always what nobody do not say one more bucket. Guarantee this. If you say one more bucket, something's gonna break.
You're gonna hit the line, hit the.
Something's gonna get broken.